So this is the introduction to the subjunctive. The subjunctive is a completely new grammar tense. It's also called a mood instead of a tense. And it is completely new and different for most Spanish students. There are a couple of reasons why. The first introductory comments that I'm going to make right now, that's going to sound like a lot of blah, 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 probably pretty quickly. It should make sense either later on in this video or absolutely in future videos whenever we do examples. Again, this is just an introduction so that you can wrap your mind around what is the subjunctive tense in Spanish. The first thing to keep in mind is it can be different for students because it has more than 300 different uses in the Spanish language. That may not sound that weird because we think of things like the imperfect that can be used in a million different ways, but really the imperfect only has one use in the Spanish language. So, for example, when we think about other things that we have learned in Spanish classes, hopefully, we think about the present tense. The present tense only has one use when you're speaking in the present, with some exceptions. The preterite and the imperfect that we all love so much, I'm sure, they only have one use. The preterite is used for concrete, specific actions in the past, and a couple other things, but kind of all fit into that one little bubble. The imperfect is used for ongoing, habitual, repetitive, past kind of stuff, setting the scene, giving the description, but it all fits into one little bubble of a certain use of certain pasts in Spanish. The subjunctive, again, has more than 300 different uses. How or why? It's hard to explain whenever we're thinking about translating Spanish to English or English to Spanish. So let English go out of your head for a second and just kind of remember that. I'm going to get up here on the board in a second and explain some of this stuff, but just remember that when we must use the subjunctive tense in Spanish, we just must use it because there are certain things that will trigger the usage of the subjunctive. It also exists in English. We just don't usually use it. We try to avoid it. When we make sentences, no matter what kind of sentences we have in the subjunctive, oftentimes when we try to translate that sentence in the subjunctive from Spanish that makes sense based on our lessons and what we've learned and what we will learn into English, it is going to feel like it should be in the present tense, or it's going to feel like it should be in the future tense. But in Spanish, it's always got to be in the subjunctive because of, once again, certain things that will trigger the use of the subjunctive just because those are the rules. So in all of the subsequent videos and all the subsequent lessons that we're going to have with subjunctive, we're just basically going to be seeing this is one way that we use the subjunctive. Then that lesson's over. This is another way that we use the subjunctive. That lesson's over. This is another way that we use the subjunctive. That lesson's over. But up here on the board, we're basically just giving an introduction to what is the subjunctive tense or the subjunctive mood. So hopefully you can kind of see this. I've already said a lot of this stuff, but let me just go over it really quickly. This is called the subjunctive. Many people mess up and call it the subjective. That's a different thing. The subjunctive tense or the subjunctive mood has more than 300 different uses. Why? Because remember, there's just certain things that trigger, just because those are the rules, the use of the subjunctive tense or the subjunctive mood in Spanish. Just because, don't try to really understand the why. As we go through different grammar points with the subjunctive, since you're not worrying about the why are we using the subjunctive, just kind of memorize the different triggers that often occur in the front half of the sentence that would require us, just because, to use the subjunctive in usually the second half of the sentence, or at least what we're going to see in this collection of videos. So when do we use the subjunctive in Spanish? We use the subjunctive in Spanish whenever we're talking about wants, wishes, hopes, desires, feelings, emotions, doubt, uncertainty. You can see that I have some of those things written up here. Desires, wishes, wants. hopes, emotions, doubt, uncertainty, but there's a big old huge etc. Why? Because this list could go on for another 290 something different uses for the subjunctive. Remember that we only use the subjunctive in compound sentences. So one thing to keep in mind is that compound sentences in English, we think about things that we went back to like first or second grade. We would say, Bobby likes apples and Mary likes bananas. And that would be a compound sentence because you have one sentence and another sentence essentially that are independent and they can be connected by and. The subjunctive is similar, but what makes this a compound sentence is that in most of the time, again, in this collection of videos, we'll call it, we're going to have a subject in the front half of the sentence, and then we're going to have a subject in the second half of the sentence. We'll see an example of that, and anything that I am saying in this lesson, if it doesn't make sense, I assure you that it will make more sense as we start to make sentences in the subjunctive, which will be in a video or two or three or so. But again, we're going to have a subject, meaning yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes, Roberto, Juan, María, Guadalupe, whoever our subject might be. It could be el perro, the dog, el gato, the cat. So we'll find that in the front half of the sentence, and we'll also find that in the, we'll call it the last half or the back half of the sentence. Also, most of the time, we're going to see a verb in the front half of the sentence and a verb in the back half of the sentence. Generally, not always, but generally, the verb in the back half of the sentence is the verb that will be in the subjunctive. Please hear me say that. The verb usually in the back half of the sentence will be the verb that is in this thing called the subjunctive, our new grammar tense. What might come up here in the front half of the sentence? Generally, it's going to be the present tense. Doesn't have to be, but that's the most common thing, to see the present tense in the front half of the sentence. All of us should be really good at the present tense by now. If not, whoops. What else can come around in the front half of the sentence? We can have ir plus a plus infinitive. We could have the future tense. We could have commands. We can have a lot of different things. So just to kind of simplify things for our first lesson, just think to yourself, the present tense is usually what I'm going to find in the front half of the sentence, and the subjunctive is generally what I'm going to find in the second half of the sentence. Which is already what you can hopefully see right in here. Subjunctive is usually in the last part, meaning the last half of the sentence. So we go over here. You heard me say a couple minutes ago that we use the subjunctive whenever we're talking about wishes and wants and hopes and desires and feelings and emotions and doubt and uncertainty. Does that mean that every single time we want to talk about how we feel, we must use the subjunctive? No, because I can say to you, and it is not a lie, I am tired. I am telling you how I feel, and I can say, yo estoy cansada. But I didn't use the subjunctive. Yo estoy cansada. That's just the regular old present tense. So it doesn't mean that every single time we talk about emotions or doubts or uncertainty or feelings or wishes or wants or hopes or desires or whatever, that we're going to use the subjunctive. Why did I not use the subjunctive in a sentence like I'm tired? Yo estoy cansada is because it's not a compound sentence, and because there is nothing in the front half of the sentence that triggers the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence. So we have up here, subjunctive is not used in a sentence like, yo quiero Taco Bell. Y'all look it up on YouTube. If you haven't seen this, there used to be a little Chihuahua dog for Taco Bell. He was the mascot. I don't know. It's on commercials. And he said, yo quiero Taco Bell. What does yo quiero Taco Bell mean? I want Taco Bell. Is a dog telling you what he wants? Yes. Does it say that the subjunctive is used for wants? Yes. But why do we not use the subjunctive in this kind of sentence? Yo quiero Taco Bell, because There is nothing in the front half of the sentence that triggers the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence because we don't have a compound sentence. So look back up here, we don't have a subject in the front half, a subject in the back half, a verb in the front half, a verb in the back half. We have one subject, yo, and we have one verb, quiero. No subjunctive in that kind of sentence. That's regular old Spanish one, present tense. What kind of sentence do we need to use the subjunctive for? It would be a sentence like, yo quiero, notice it starts out the same, yo quiero que tú vayas a Taco Bell conmigo. Yo quiero que tú vayas a Taco Bell conmigo. Let's break that sentence down. We're not to making sentences yet, so if you don't know how to make this sentence yet, it's okay for right now. Yo, that will be my first subject. So remember, here's my subject in the front half of the sentence. And in our example sentence, it's yo. Then we have quiero. That would be I want, yo quiero. And so there's my verb in the front half of the sentence. This que is something that we're going to see a lot, not all the time, but a lot in subjunctive sentences. It's basically that little word that's going to divide or separate the two different clauses. You don't need to know that, just FYI, that separates the two different clauses in subjunctive sentences. So that generally translates to that in English, not the that that's like, that's my book, not that, more something like, the one that I like is the red one. So that separates different clauses in usually compound sentences. Get used to that que. Remember, when que has an accent mark, it means what. When it does not have an accent mark, it generally just means that. Get used to the que, meaning that. The tú is our subject number 2. Remember, we had yo in the front half of the sentence as our first subject. We had tú in the second half of the sentence now as our second subject. This vayas is a word that you maybe have never, ever seen before. Vayas is the subjunctive for ir, to go. So just this first part of the sentence, we have, I want that you go a Taco Bell conmigo, to Taco Bell with me. If I say to you, yo quiero que tú vayas a Taco Bell conmigo, vayas is our new thing that we're working with here, which is the subjunctive. For what verb? For ir. It happens to be any regular verb in the subjunctive. When I say to you, I want that you go to Taco Bell with me, that might sound a little bit weird or a little bit formal. We don't generally turn to a friend and say, hey man, I want that you go to Taco Bell with me. But if you think about it in just like everyday regular English, it would be something like, I want you to go to Taco Bell with me. Try to get away from our everyday regular English, because when you try to translate that word for word, I want you to go to Taco Bell with me, you will be more inclined to use the infinitive of to go. I want you to go. And that would mean that you would mess up every single sentence in the subjunctive. So remember we talked a little bit ago about there are certain things that happen in the front half of the sentence that would just trigger the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence. In this sentence, yo quiero que tú vayas a Taco Bell conmigo. So I want you to go to Taco Bell with me, or better yet, get used to this structure in English. I want that you go to Taco Bell with me. A couple things that trigger the use of subjunctive. I'm talking about what I want. Guess what? There is not only the factor of me talking about what I want, but also there is doubt or uncertainty, because I can look at you and say, I want you to go to Taco Bell with me, or I want that you go to Taco Bell with me, or yo quiero que tú vayas a Taco Bell conmigo. And guess what? If you don't want to go, you don't have to. So just because I want it, there's some doubt or uncertainty whether or not that's going to come true. We see the yo, subject in the first half of the sentence, tú, subject in the second half of the sentence, yo quiero, so verb in the first half of the sentence, vayas, verb in the second half of the sentence. Some of the other things that trigger the use of the subjunctive, just because, remember I said at the beginning, why do we use the subjunctive? Because there might be an adverb or more commonly an adverbial expression in the front half of the sentence that triggers the use of the subjunctive. That's when you guys are going to see different videos where we're going to say, hey, same day, different, no, not same day. Same thing, different day with a twist. What's the same thing? The subjunctive. The different day with a twist is just going to be a different adverb or adverbial expression in the front half of the sentence that triggers the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence. Or maybe there will be certain verbs, no creer, no pensar, dudar, etc., that will trigger the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence. Sometimes there are just expressions like ojalá, or impersonal expressions like es importante, it's important, es bueno, it's good, that will trigger in a compound sentence the use of the subjunctive in the second half of the sentence. And remember that these are things that will happen in the front half of the sentence that will trigger the subjunctive in the last half of the sentence. Last thing for this introductory video, just the introduction, we haven't even gotten to anything else yet, is how do you conjugate verbs in the subjunctive. So that's the next video. But just to give an introduction to that, remember that all of the conjugations for verbs in the subjunctive are based on the yo box, or the first person singular conjugation of the present tense. So think to yourself something like when you create formal usted commands and you have to use the yo box or the yo conjugation as your starting point, that's also your starting point for the subjunctive. Those of us who are good with the formal usted commands will probably pick up the conjugations for this fairly quickly, easily. It won't be a thing. If you're not good with formal commands, or even worse, if you're not that good with the present tense, this might be like 35 mountains and hills and things to climb or jump or whatever. So remember, your starting point for all of the conjugation, the subjunctive, will be the present tense, yo conjugation. Second thing, think back to formal usted commands. We did the same thing. After you get that yo conjugation in the present tense, what do? We drop that O. So this way it says drop the O. The next thing that we do, or the next step, is we add opposite endings. So remember that AR verbs in Spanish, the opposite endings kind of look like ER verb looking endings. ER and IR verbs in Spanish will have AR verb looking endings in the subjunctive. That's what we mean by opposite endings. Think about it kind of like AR verb having ER verb looking endings in the subjunctive is opposite of what it would have been if it were in the present tense. And last two things, don't skip any steps. First step, take your verb back to the yo box of the present tense. Second step, drop that O at the end. Third step, add your opposite endings. So again, AR verbs have ER verb looking endings. ER and IR verbs have AR verb looking endings. That's the next video. And very last thing, this video is done, is you must memorize all of your irregular verbs in the subjunctive. There's a handful of them. And okay, very last thing. If you memorized, or if you happen to know your irregular verbs for formal usted commands, you just gotta buy one, get one free, because the same verbs that are irregular as formal usted commands are also the verbs that are irregular in the subjunctive. That's it for this lesson.